Alright, so today we're kind of rewinding it back to a topic that we somewhat covered before. It's from John Morrison. He says, I've been wondering, can a modern mage compete against a mage from the age of the gods? And if so, who are they? Like, could Toko Aozaki compete against somebody like Medea or Bluebeard? I find this question to be really loaded, and that's not a shot at John, because this isn't the first time that I've seen this type of question. I've seen many people put these sort of things into the air. It's just that there's many different factors to take into consideration, and most of the people having these types of conversations wouldn't even address them. So for starters, there's this huge implication that if you're at the top, you can't lose. I see it all the time. It's like, okay, they're from the age of the gods, so inherently they can be weaker. There's no way that they could lose, and it's ridiculous. And then that same person will use a strong character as an example and be like, well, you see how they lost? It's because they weren't skilled enough, quote unquote. So the idea that Medea can't be beaten is silly. And even in the responses of the very thread that we're talking about, you have people saying, well, the skills, the ability, the circumstance matters first and foremost, as always. That's always the thing. And they use Alco as an example. Alco knows true magic, but he says that he believes that Alco isn't even top 5 mages, despite her knowing true magic. So how far does that really get her, depending on who she's fighting? And a lot of that applies here. Having Age of Gods level Magecraft isn't the end all be all. By lore, any form of Medea should absolutely destroy Toko. She should. But at the same time, we've seen countless events where what should have been ends up not being what's actually happening, especially with somebody as strong as Medea. A lot of people are going to reference my Don't Sleep video, and they're gonna bring up, look at all the things that Medea can do. There's no way that she could possibly lose. When the story doesn't hold her back, she's EX. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of things that Medea can do. You know my motto, but did she do them? So when you think about it that way, it really levels out the playing field. I'm not giving anybody any leeway for things that they didn't accomplish. I take them into consideration, as I should, but that's really as far as that goes. The whole idea of pitting servants against humans, to me, it's also ridiculous. I seen another person on one of my other videos, and he was talking about how a mage should always be able to go up against a servant, like actually fight against them. And I completely disagree. Being able to go against a servant should be the exception, not the rule. Because if that's the case, why even be a servant? Servants are meant to be better. They're meant to be these higher, otherworldly, supernatural entities. I mean, they're literally a manifestation of Nasu versus God itself that shouldn't even be there, the swirl of radix, right? So I wouldn't even consider that a just fight to begin with. And then you have someone come in and be like, well, how about a living servant? I don't consider that to be a just fight either, because as you know, we've seen some living servants do better than actual servants. So I don't really look at that as a downgrade either. The only just way to do that fight would be Medea when she was actually alive and has no servant ties whatsoever, and then see how she fares. And we hardly know anything about her in that state, because everything else is just extra. If you're to use her servant form for an example, servants can do all types of things. Servants can get their hearts gouged out and still fight, get their head cut off and grow it back. It's not even a comparison. Now, supposedly, based off of what we do know, Medea is supposed to be top 5 mages from the Age of Gods, someone even regarded by Solomon as the king of mages himself. But at the same time, has Medea really beat anybody notable? If we're being honest, who else has Medea beat that's Age of Gods level? Who else has Medea beat that's a modern mage? Atrum, her original master? He sucks. Shiro beat Atrum at 17. What Atrum was good at was more so on his intelligence side rather than his combat. I covered a lot of things in her Don't Sleep but it was hardly feats of that stature. She can reinforce her master and make him servant level, but can she do that for herself? Because as we seen when she was fighting against Ymir or Gilgamesh, she has a really hard time when people are actually on her ass. I know people love to make things up, but I'm going by what happened. So as far as whether or not Toko can compete with Medea if they were both actually human and it was actually a fair fight, honestly I think she could. I mean, if we were to use Prelati for instance, we know that Toko killed Prelati over a dozen of times, and Prelati has access to Magecraft that's on par with Age of God level spells. And I know the guys are going to use El Malloy as an example because there is a point in El Malloy where Toko actually goes against a mage from the Age of the Gods, and she's a servant. She does her best to fend her off, but she still loses. But like I said, that was a servant. Alco had true magic. I mean, going by your own format, compatibility is everything. So just because she lost against Faker does not automatically mean that she'll lose against Medea. And that goes for any character. I hate when people do that. A lost against B, so evidently they would also lose against C. That's not how that works. And we know that's never been how fate works. It gets especially tricky when you consider that Toko can't even be killed. We've never seen an instance of Toko ever fully dying. She's immortal. That's why I rank her so high in the first place. And she's just one example. So it's not a matter of Toko losing, because what is a loss for Toko really? You just destroy one of her dolls and then she comes right back? Is that really a loss? I think a complete and whole utter loss would be the destruction of her soul itself. And Medea has no access to that. People forget about mystery. Yeah, she's from the Age of the Gods, but how much does she know about Toko's puppet Magecraft? And that's really just one avenue of the spells that she can use. Same thing goes for Medea, but Medea isn't the person that people are expecting to lose here. It's Toko. So obviously I'm gonna be more at her defense than Medea, because what I've seen from Medea is that she's bullied two kids that didn't even really know what was going on. But when you start putting her up against people that can actually match her foolery, it gets a lot more intense. Even what Kazuki did to Saber was merely on surprise and couldn't be done again if they tried to do so, because she knows it's coming now. And it goes the other way too, in Medea's defense. Even when Ren beat her, I still feel like a part of that was bogus, because you can fly. Why are you flying close to somebody that you know that could have physical capability? And you know that you're not good at physical combat. It just seems real cheesy. I always give Ren her props for that, but that's just as bogus as anything. Nobody's flying that close when they know they're not good at close range combat. But Medea still did it because somehow the top dog has to lose. It's not a matter of if Medea could get rid of Toko, because Toko is just gonna come back to life. It's a matter of if Medea can stop herself from being taken out is the question, because she's not immortal. She's never been stated to be immortal. Even with her summoning a dragon, she can summon anything that she wants to. Doesn't mean that she can't lose. It's a matter of how that bout goes between the two. That's the reason why I do bouts, because on one day she could win, and then the next day it could be a completely different story based on where they're at or what they decide to go for first. But personally, if you're talking about getting at least one round on her, I think that she could do it for sure. She has too much mystery on her side. People forget about mystery. Yeah, Age of God witches can nullify things from the modern world that they can understand, sure, but I highly doubt that she can understand anything in Toko's kit just based off of how irregular it is. I mean, really think about it. And I know a lot of people don't know much about Toko, so it's gonna be real lopsided because people haven't read Witch on the Holy Night or Case Files or El Malloy in general, so they're just gonna be guessing off of what they heard in videos or the wiki. But really think about it. What does Medea know about her kit? Nothing. It's gonna be way harder than a matchup than it looks like. I'll tell you that much. And that fight that she had against Faker, that was a part of Toko's life prior to her attaching her soul to puppetry. So that was her real body. She couldn't afford to lose that body. It's completely different now. And she's just one of many mages. I just used her because that's the person that you brought up. Once you get into the higher echelon of mages, most of those guys are immortal, or they might as well be. I I just hate to bring many of them up because we don't know that much about them. Zelrech, for example, and I know he's not a modern mage, but I'd be reaching to say how Zelrech fights because everything that we know about Zelrech is completely anecdotal. So I really couldn't tell you how Zelrech fights. I'd be guessing. We don't even know if Zelrech is top 5. You assume based off the gravitas of his character, but you don't know that for certain. You think Prisma Ilya can't get around to Medea, Monica, Prime Zokin? Yeah, right. And this doesn't even include Dead Apostles, who a lot of which are just buffed up modern mages.